Hello and welcome to UK Versus. Today we're taking a look at Project K, the new Riot Games partnership with UVS, and I am joined by one of the amazing Project K community who is dipping his toes into universes himself, Magearmour. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, not doing too bad. Just happy to be here.
So you're going to give me a quick run through, answer all my noob questions about the cards, and hopefully give me some kind of insight as to how this game's played, and hopefully as a little bit of flavour as to how it all kind of ties in with the League of Legends lore, which I believe is kind of messy as it comes from like 16 different places at the minute.
I'm not the person to talk about the League of Legends lore, honestly. I've watched the Arcane show. That is where most of knowledge of the lore comes from, or at least, and then a bit of the card game stuff, the previous digital-only card game that they produced.
That's the Legends of Runeterra?
Yeah, that's Legends of Runeterra.
Yes, and I believe when they did the announcement for this back in November, December of 2024, they did say they were going to be drawing upon all the different aspects of Runeterra for the art and style of the cards. So Legends of Runeterra is probably going to be mixed in there as well.
Yeah, you see a lot of artwork that was used in Legend of Runeterra amongst cards here on the table. Actually, you can see quite a lot of repeated artwork from Runeterra or from League of Legends splash artwork and just other sources that they've drawn upon.
So speaking of the cards we have here, let's take a look. So we've got multicolored cards, some landscape cards, and some cards that have only got symbols on. And I know these are your runes.
Yeah. So the game is based around, or the game's resource system is based around these runes. So you can see there are 6 different colors of runes. They are, from the top, we have mental runes, which are blue, order runes, which are yellow, fury runes, which are red, chaos runes, which are purple, physical runes, which are orange, and cam runes, which are green. When you're creating your deck will generally be a mix of 2 types. Your resources and how the resource system works is you create a secondary deck to go along with your main deck, which is your rune deck, which is made up of 12 cards of your choice from the 2 colors of runes that you're using for your deck.
So you have 12 runes in your rune deck, which is what the different backs of the cards are, because your main deck, your rune deck will have different backs, which is why there was 3 different backs on the cards when they were doing the advertisement.
Yes.
So you can split up your rune deck into any ratios you want. I could have 11 chaos and 1 physical, I imagine. But
yes.
what dictates the colors of your rune deck?
So step 1 in deck building is to pick a legend. So here you can see some examples of legends. These are the 4 legends that we have from the trial decks. So they are basically just saying that the character that you're playing as part of this kind of combat against the other players you're playing at the table, and they all have a banner on them, or dual banner, which tells you which colors they are. So we see Victor here has the mental and order banner. They're both blue and yellow, and so your deck can be made up of both blue and yellow cards.
That makes sense. So do the runes have their own kind of play mechanics? Do they have their own identity in the game? And does that impact your champion? So we see here with Jinx, we have the chaotic and fury runes, and
yes. So we don't have a clear full idea of the full range of abilities and stuff that these runes each represent, though we can see kind of some themes developing with the cards that are currently have available. So chaos seems to be a lot of movement based effects. You'll see later on when I explain how battlefields work that the game has effectively different zones that your cards move around. And so this chaos seems to take advantage of that by moving their cards around more. Whereas fury seems to be they take advantage of a mechanic called accelerate, which is effectively making your unit available to attack immediately.
Yes, I did see in the Discord that accelerate is the ability that essentially lets your unit come in not exhausted, so can move to a battlefield immediately.
Yes, and begin attacking.
Yeah, there is a lot of keywords. I've just seen you've got tank and Death Kneel, and Ganking. Ganking's the only one I actually know because it was part of someone's learn to play, and that's the one that basically just lets you move between battlefields.
Yes. So when we get to battlefields, I kind of explain that generally it works in a you have your base, which is kind of your board, what you're playing on your side of the field. And then to actually do combat with your opponent, you're going to select one of the two battlefields, which will be available when you're playing against each other, to move to. And ganking just allows you to, rather than having to go from base to battlefield to battlefield to base, you can go from base to battlefield and then move between the two battlefields.
So with universes, we have our attacks and our foundations in the same deck. So when we're building up our foundation base, we need to draw those cards. But you said that the rune deck and the unit deck are separate. So is it like an inscription thing where you choose where to draw from and build up that aspect, or do you get to play with both decks at the same time?
So you play both at the same time. So how that works is at the beginning of your turn, you take the top two cards of your rune deck and put them straight into play. So you're getting 2 resources every single turn, and then you will draw 1 card from your main deck.
Ah, fair.
So
do those runes come in exhausted, or can you use them immediately?
Ready to play immediately.
That's awesome. And is there any hand size limit in Project K?
We haven't been made aware of any kind of hand size limit, but I don't think there is. Something to be said about the runes, just because you might think, oh, if I get 2 every turn, then after 6 turns I've got them all. Not quite how that works. So it's actually a dual resource system. Runes can generate 2 kinds of resource. So when you look at a rune card, it says exhaust, add 1. That's the base. That adds energy. Then recycle me, add, and then the rune symbol. That's power.
That was that's something I came across in the ruling. So if you look at like the carnivorous snapvine, you need to exhaust 5 any rune to play it, but you have to recycle 2 physical runes as an additional cost.
Yeah. So you have to generate that 2 power somehow. So that means that the rune system's kind of dynamic, and that they come into play, and then to play big, kind of loud effects, but effects that really impact the board immediately. That's what most of the recycle stuff is for. You find that a lot of the things that recycle are like kind of above curve or quite powerful compared to other cards that are costed the same energy wise.
Yeah, it's one of the things I noticed and was saying in the Discord. The seals seem very powerful because although you need to recycle a power to play them, and you commit no resources, but they come in with commit, add 1 power. You can activate anytime, so you can essentially stop yourself from having to recycle a rune to fulfill the power requirement.
Yeah, effectively, for every time that you are able to exhaust this seal, you're effectively putting yourself ahead by 1 resource.
So with deck building in this game, it's a 40 card limit with a 3 per card limit.
Yeah, so a full play set of any card is 3 cards, and you're building a 40 card deck minimum size. I don't think they've said if there is a maximum size yet.
And you get your champion, you get your legend, and then you get a champion.
Yes, so once you've built your deck, you're going to pick your legend. So say here we have Victor. Then as part of deck building, you can include a Victor card in your deck. You can include the Victor card if you play any Order Champion or any Order Legend, however. At the beginning of the game, you select a champion that has the same name as your legend to kind of act as almost like an extra card in your hand.
And do they start in your deck, or do they start in a particular zone? Because I think I saw...
They start in a separate zone, kind of like, so they start with your legend. And then you can choose to play that as if it is a card from your hand.
Are they counted in your 40 card deck? So essentially, can you run a 39 card deck and your champion and legend separate? Yep. Nice. So,
you effectively you're playing a 39 card deck. Yeah.
So decks are going to be quite consistent in this game. You're going to be running a lot of 3-elves, and you're going to be seeing the same stuff quite consistently.
Yeah, we've been seeing at least with the super aggressive deck, which is the kind of Jinx deck here. She can kind of close out games turn 6 or 7, and it's quite consistent as well. If you have the tools necessary, that's just from our play of the game back and forward. There is obviously much more to be said about that. We don't have all the tools in the game. We don't know what the rest of the card pool looks like, and also there is the multiplayer aspect of this game to be aware of as well.
Yes, the multiplayer aspects are going to a bit more when I've got more on the hang of the ropes of it, but that's kind of cool that if I play a mental and order victor, I could essentially have a mental or order champion once those cards are kind of out there. Because we can see with the Volibear, they've already got one of each.
Yeah, so we don't know what the chaos version of Yasuo or the mental version of Victor looks like, because these weren't included in the trial decks. But both Jinx and Volibear have both of their versions, both of their different.
So this means that
kind of
you can end up
powers.
with two. Essentially, you can see that you're playing against a Jinx leader, but the champion forces the deck to be played completely differently. In universes, we keep our characters. Well, we're supposed to keep our characters face down until the round starts, so we don't give away information to our opponents. Is that something similar that happens in Project K, or do you just sort of like go, "This is my champion, this is my leader, let's go"?
We don't have any kind of formal play procedure at the moment, just because the game is still very much not released. However, how we've been playing it so far, and what the folks at Riot recommended, is that we each reveal each piece of information at the same time before we make those choices. There's actually 3 pieces of information that you give your opponent before the game begins. There's the legend you want to play, there's the champion that you're going to use, and then there's the battlefield that you're going to pick.
Yes.
So, along with your rune deck, which is the 12 runes that you're going to use to play your game, the 40 card main deck, you also bring 3 battlefields. So when you're playing against someone and you're playing a best of 3, you utilize all these battlefields as they are played each match you play again on each of them. Whereas if you're playing just a best of 1, you select one at random. But that is a choice that you make before the game begins. So you say, "Oh, this is the legend I'm going to play. This is the champion I'm going to play, and then this is the battlefield I'm bringing to the battle." And then your opponent brings one, and then you're going to fight over each other's battlefields.
Yeah, that is something I did see when I was going for the rules. Is your battlefield deck contains 3 cards. In a best of 1, you just shuffle up and pick one at random. But in a best of 3, you start which one you're going to pick with, and you can't select that battlefield again for the best of 3.
Yeah, so there's like almost like a little bit of like a counter picking thing going on, because you can't play the same one. So you know that if I am aware that you're playing, say, Volibear, and Volibear plays these 3 battlefields currently in the starter deck, maybe I'm aware that Sigil of Storm is quite a common battlefield for Volibear, so I'm aware that this is coming at some point. If you don't play this on round 1, then I can be ready for it on maybe round 2 or 3, knowing that you have not used it yet.
Are there any cards that force a change in the battlefield, or just interact with the battlefield as a effect at the moment, or is it all just kind of battling over the battlefield?
The battlefields themselves have their own effects, which kind of manipulate. They basically give you a new rule to play with in the game, based on the battlefield that you're playing. Some of them are much more impactful than others. For example, here you can see, Torgon's Peak. When you conquer here, choose 2 runes, ready them at the end of this turn. This one can be extremely impactful, as you've ready your runes to effectively play responses to your opponent.
Yeah.
So as you're fighting over this, it can kind of come back and forward. Altar of Unity is another one. So you're just generating resources, like effectively new resources every turn.
So let's go through.
There's no cards that currently affect the battlefield by changing them or anything.
Okay, so the 4th piece of information you get, of course, is mulligans. In this game, you draw 4 cards. You can then mulligan up to 2.
Yes.
And then do you put the cards and shuffle in before you draw, or do you just draw 2, then shuffle the cards back in?
You put them on the bottom of your deck and they stay there.
Oh, so you put them on the deck, you draw your next 2 cards, and that's your hand.
Yeah, so something that this game, something that the designers of this game wanted to be clear is that there's not going to be any tutoring or shuffling. They want the deck to shuffle, and then that to be at the beginning of the game. They think shuffling and searching for your deck, and the process of shuffling, presenting so that your opponent can cut your deck, or whatever, takes up a lot of time. And so they just have decided very explicitly that they do not want any kind of shuffling of your deck once a game has begun.
That's very interesting. That's a very cool stance to take, because that's one of the things that we have seen in other card games, people using to delay and spend a lot of time is just running. I'm going to make a deck where I get to shuffle and search my deck and just waste as much time as possible and get the win that way. So it's great to see Riot. I've already kind of taken into account that kind of aspect of gameplay and go, no, we want a straightforward game. The decks are small enough and consistent for as it is. You shouldn't be needing to tutor, so we're just going to stick with it as is.
They also have this mechanic, this recycle mechanic, which kind of already plays into the idea of adding cards to the bottom of your deck. So effectively, any card that mentions kind of effectively removing a card from use, like for example the mulligans, the actual mulligan says pick up to two of your cards of your hand to recycle and then draw the difference. So it is like good that they've decided that this is the terminology and we're going to use this forever.
So recycling puts them to the bottom of the deck?
Yeah, so if any card ever says recycle this, then it means put me back onto the bottom of whatever deck I came from.
Oh, so that's why. So runes will never really hit the trash pile, because no matter what, you're always recycling them. So they just go to the bottom of the rune deck, so you're never really running out of resources.
Yep.
And then when a unit is defeated, it's trashed. And I believe when you run out of cards in your deck, your opponent scores a point, and then you just shuffle up your trash and do it again.
Yes, that's the only time I think so far that we know that where you will shuffle your deck through in the middle of a game. Though we have never gotten to the point where someone needs to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's say like break glass in case of emergency point system. Yeah,
and very much so. I think in those cases when you will shuffle your deck and give your opponent a point, that point will probably win them the game.
So speaking of winning the game, how do we do that?
Okay, as we've mentioned before, the game is kind of like progressed back and forward is you're fighting over these battlefields. There are two ways to kind of score points in this game, and the goal is to get to 8 points. All the ways to score points generally work for the battlefields. So whenever I conquer a battlefield, when I move a unit there, and either you are not contesting, or I win a fight there and trash the units that you've left, I score a point and conquer that battlefield. Some battlefields will have effects that say, when you conquer here, do this. And the other method of scoring a battlefield is by holding it. That is beginning your turn with units on it. So there's this kind of like dynamic back and forth where I push onto a battlefield to knock you off of it, and then you're kind of given the next turn in order to try and get me off of it. And if you're not, then I'll score an additional point for every turn that I hold it.
Okay, so if there's an open battlefield and there's a battlefield my opponent already controls, I'm incentivized to take the battlefield off you, because if I don't, you're just going to get an additional point when your turn starts.
Yes, as well as there are effects that you'll trigger by holding battlefields and stuff. The little caveat to scoring and winning the game is once you get to 7 points, there's like a check system where I am on my 7 point. I now need to score both battlefields to win. So I just need to, in a single turn, either hold a battlefield. So begin my turn by with control of a battlefield. The hold would score me my 8th point, or I need to conquer both battlefields in the same turn.
Okay, so if I already control one battlefield and I'm on my set, does it count if you've held one? So if I've held one battlefield and then conquer the other one, that counts as my 8 point because I okay.
Yeah, because you would be scoring the second one. So you just need to score. Technically, it's score all battlefields, because in a multiplayer game, there's actually more than 2 battlefields. But you need to score all battlefields in order to gain your 8 points.
So if I'm in a really bad position, but I've got 7 points and I control neither battlefield, getting one isn't enough. I either have to get one and hold it for a turn, or I have to get both of them and claim the win.
Yes. So what you'll find in the aggressive playstyle that like Jinx has is she'll like really push, kind of knock, using single units to just kind of knock you off of the battlefield over and over again until they get to that 7th point. And then they need to try really hard to effectively pull off both. Because if, say, you're playing Volibear, whose whole thing is just playing massive sticky units,
So
then it's really difficult for Jinx, who plays super aggressive low to the ground stuff, to knock off that
running
super
lots of
sticky unit.
little units into big monsters is not the best idea. That's a lot of cannon fodder.
Yeah, because you end up just throwing it all away, and you end up not gaining any progress.
Makes a lot of sense. So, a battle over a battleground is a showdown.
A showdown is a moment in time which happens during a combat. It can also happen at other times, but most of the time it happens during combat. And this is a opportunity for both players to interact with one another. So the types of cards in the game, there's units, spells, and gear. And during a showdown, both players get a chance to play spells. So effectively, say you attack me with a unit, I have a defending unit. We would then enter the showdown. Defender gets first priority to play any spells. If I play a spell, say like a buff spell for my unit, that resolves, and then you would be able. Then you're given an opportunity to play something.
But
It's very
I am
similar
able to
to
respond to your spells.
yes. So some spells have the reaction keyword, which lets you play them in response to my spell so that yours resolves before mine does.
Yeah, and I was going to say that's kind of like the stack or the chain in Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic, where it's a first in, last out system. So if you react to my react and I react to your react, basically the last card that was played resolves first, and the first card that was played resolves last.
Yes. And if there's no reactions and it just kind of goes backwards and forwards in us playing spells, it's very similar to how I think it's how Enhance works for universes, where each player kind of goes until we both pass.
Yeah, so it's kind of like our hands and response step where we can keep responding to each other. And I do believe you can respond to anything within the kind of like stack of responses. You don't have to wait until stuff resolves.
Yes. So you also don't have to wait until the whole thing resolves as well. You can wait till one portion of it goes, and then you can kind of jump in with your response.
That's pretty cool.
This whole system as well is like a little bit loose right now because we don't have the exact timings on things, just because there's no comprehensive rules or whatever. But so far, it's effectively a case of when an attack happens, any triggers which would resolve from that attack go on the chain and then resolve. Then we move on to the showdown, where the defender gets the opportunity to do something first, and then it returns to the attacker, and then back and forward, back and forward. The other time that a showdown can happen is epic spells.
Ooh.
So some spells, so if we look over here, like Unchecked Power, have this keyword epic, which starts a showdown. So this spell is so big and powerful that part of the balancing mechanism is that everybody has a chance to do something right now.
So basically, I'm going to board wipe all the battlefields. Stop me.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's a nasty spell. So take a look at a unit. I can see like they have a range of power, which I imagine is the fist, which is the damage they'll deal. Is that also how much damage they can take?
Yeah, so might is a combined like kind of power and toughness. It is the amount of damage that they deal and the amount of damage they can take. So Tryndamere here can take up to 8 damage until he is removed and put to the trash, and also in a combat will deal 8 damage.
So when after a showdown resolves, so say we've done all our abilities, played our responses, is it a collective number of might that we divide, or is it just each unit does its amount of might to another unit?
You total up all the might on your side and distribute it as you like amongst your opponent's units.
Fair enough. So you can kind of go, okay, you've got 10 1-power units. This one person's doing 10. He's just going to swing and take them all out with a single go.
Tryndamere explicitly is actually kind of interesting, because Tryndamere says if I've dealt 5 or more excess damage to an opponent's unit, you score a point. So that gets around the normal ways that you would score a point. So you don't need to conquer the battlefield. You don't need to hold it. You just need to deal 5 or more damage. So Tryndamere specifically is interesting in that you can go, hey, he's got a big guy and a little guy. Instead of dealing with the big guy, I'm just going to throw all my damage on the little guy and score that extra point.
How does a battlefield get decided? Say we both have kind of like an equal level of might. we assign it to the units, and we both have surviving units. Who gets the battlefield?
So the attacker actually loses in that scenario. All attacking units are then returned to your base if you have any surviving units.
So units that were taken out through might get trashed, but any surviving units go back to the base. I imagine they go back exhausted because they've just been in a big fight.
They'll go back. They'll go back in whatever state they got there in. So if they move there via an ability or whatever, then they might be able to attack again if they weren't exhausted.
Oh, so I take it you exhaust the unit to move it, but if it was already there, if it has some kind of ability, that means it doesn't get exhausted the first time it moves.
Yeah. I mean, come and take a look at Kane over here. So he specifically has an ability that says, if I've moved twice, I am invulnerable. I don't take any damage. And so very.
Can you ganking whilst exhausted?
No, specifically to move, you exhaust to move. However, there are abilities that let you move even without exhausting. So if you look over here at the Yasuo legend ability, he has an ability. The Yasuo legend specifically has an ability that lets you pay 2 energy and exhaust to move a friendly unit. They don't need to be exhausted or ready. It just moves them. So you can use his ability in combination with Kane to move him to one battlefield, win a fight there, and then gank over to the other battlefield, and Kane would not take damage from that combat.
So he's always going to survive that combat.
Yeah.
Nice. And just looking at that, so that's an ability that I assume costs 2 runes, and then you commit your legend to pay for the ability.
Yeah, you would exhaust the legend in order to play the ability.
Oh, yeah, exhaust, not commit. Commit is yeah, so you exhaust and pay 2 runes, no power cost, but that's kind of like your legend ability of just going, I'm going to be able to play, if I play this big unit and have 2 runes left over, I'm going to be able to put it straight into the fight.
Yep. There's also, each of the legends have an ability, not too dissimilar to this, but they have kind of ability which kind of dictates, not kind of dictates, but kind of pushes you towards a certain playstyle. So Jinx here, at the start of your beginning phase, draw 1 if you have 1 or fewer cards in hand. But Jinx wants to be throwing all her cards down as much as possible to get that extra card draw.
Yeah, that's powerful. Extra card draw is very powerful, and I've seen from like the chaos cards and stuff like that. There's a lot of discard effects, so you can get Jinx quite low.
Yeah, and then Volibear here. Whenever you play a unit with 5 or more might, you may exhaust me to play the top rune exhausted. So he effectively, gets you further ahead mana wise. You can get ahead, kind of pay a bunch of energy, maybe recycle them, and then also get them back.
Yeah, because you just get, essentially that's letting you build a 3rd one in, but although it's exhausted by building your big things in.
Mm-hmm.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think I've picked up the basics. Is there any kind of, after the battlefield, after you guys have done and your units have returned, I imagine you can just keep doing that, but is there any main phase 2 kind of after steps from the battle, or once you've done fighting over the battlefield, you go, okay, that's my turn, come at me?
So there's just one big main phase. There's no order in which you have to do these actions. You can go and fight over one battlefield, then play another card, and then go fight at the other one, or play a card, fight at one battlefield, fight at the other one, then fight at the other one again. It's totally up to you, like the order in which your actions take. It's just you decide when your turn ends. There's no forced time that you have to end your turn.
That makes sense. It's similar to how we just have one big combat phase, but we have to build in foundations where you guys are getting your 2 runes at the start step.
Yeah, there's no failing to play and then that being the end of everything.
That makes a lot of sense. If you've got some demo decks, let's give it a go.